Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the Inside Bassmaster Podcast presented by Black Rifle Coffee Company. I'm your host, as usual, Ronnie Moore. My co-host, like always, Kyle, Jessie, hanging out in Birmingham, Alabama. We're all on the road. We're all doing some different things. I just came back from Texas. You're going to Tennessee, but we're still previewing the third stop of the Bassmaster Elite Series season, and that takes us to Columbia, South Carolina, and Lake Murray, a place we haven't been since 2011, Kyle, and before that we had an Elite Series event in 2008. So just two stops recently, and that's recently is over a decade ago. So most of the field has no experience at Lake Murray. A couple guys have some experience in different levels, different tours, things like that. All of that knowledge and all the information, trying to gather it together to be able to produce a winning pattern for the third stop of the season. I'm looking forward to Lake Murray. It's not far from, my neck of the woods where I grew up. And it's a place that I'm glad we're going back to because it's one of the most underrated lakes in the country right now.
Yeah, no question. It's one of those lakes that, over the last handful of years, at least even since I've moved to Birmingham and even before then, you hear guys talk about how good it is. And you start seeing some of the tournament weights and you're like, holy cow, this place is really good. And the amount of fish and the quality fish. It's one that I'm certainly looking forward to. My brother actually lives in Columbia, South Carolina now. I've had the opportunity to fish Murray a couple times. It was during the spring, very similar to like when we're going to be there for the Elite Series. So I think it's going to be really good. I think guys will obviously catch them in a variety of different ways, which is something we'll get into more. But I'm looking forward to this tournament more than as much, at least compared to any tournament of the season.
Yeah, and a lot of the tournament, the tangible tournament evidence that you could watch and kind of learn about Lake Murray, that's mid to late May, maybe July or August, like just different patterns at Lake Murray. But the springtime, like most places, is deadly. But the Carolinas, if we go to the Carolinas in March, you see a certain type of body of water, but you start to see like Hartwell at the Classic, it's starting to explode. You see the remnants of maybe the spawn's about to explode. All these different patterns are there. But then you get to April, and April in the Carolinas is really when it stabilizes. You're going to see some great fishing. You're going to see multiple ways to catch them. One thing about that is when that weather stabilizes in the Carolinas, you get all phases of the spawn. You'll have some late pre-spawners that are off a point, and then they'll be welcomed by post-spawners that are coming off as well. And then you have obviously all stages of the spawn in terms of making beds, locking on, staying there for the duration of the spawn. Those things will all come into play. But what I love about the Carolinas is when you have these different types of bait fish that occupy a body of water, some places just have shad. Some places have gobies. Some places have these things. When you get to the Carolinas, you have a shad spawn possibility. You have brim beds that could show themselves and become a factor for guys in different stages of the lake. Then you also have the blueback herring spawn. And for that herring spawn, that is a game changer. That is something that these fish are wired differently when you come to a blueback herring lake. These places, these fish are trained differently. Every blueback herring lake that we've been to has largemouth and spotted bass. When you think about Lake Murray, maybe even a Clark's Hill, they may have some spotted bass down there, at times, but you can fish these places for largemouth, whether you're targeting the back of a creek or you're targeting the end of a point. That's what's cool is other bodies of water, you're like, I got to go fish for largemouth now. I have 5 spotted bass in my bag. And you go do something opposite in the back. You can go and do inside a pocket, on a main lake, up the river, and you're fishing for the same thing. Herring or brim bed, programmed fish. And so I'm really excited about those couple possibilities. And obviously the visuals there at Lake Murray could be astounding. A place that doesn't have too many rivers or arms, we think about Hartwell, it's got the Tougaloo, and it's got the Seneca, and it's got all these different rivers that feed into it. But you just have the big and little Saluda, and then you've got a lot of fingers. You've got a lot of creeks that don't go too far. It's not the biggest place in terms of how far expansive, but man, when you look at that map, there's a lot of places to choose from. So I'm really excited about it. And Kyle, you can mention this. Our guest today is going to be one that's going to break it down for sure.
Oh, there's no question. I think we have about as good of a guest as possible. It's something when you look at the field and you see the amount of North Carolina and South Carolina anglers we have, it's like, man, there's a lot of guys that fish the Elite Series that have probably fished Lake Murray, but probably none that have fished Lake Murray more than our guest today. I would suspect in his time of living, I would say, because he's
percentage
young.
of his life for sure.
Maybe a few guys that are a bit older that may have fished a little more than he has, but.
Yeah, and if we don't have our guest today, Patrick Walters, on it, like you said, we could have had like a 10-panel angler group of all the Carolina guys that could probably give their 2 cents on Lake Murray. But like you mentioned, Kyle, Patrick Walters, our guest today, lives over by Santee Cooper Lakes, which is the 4th stop of the season. We could just have him preview that one as well if we wanted to. But you spent a lot of time, Patrick, at Lake Murray, Columbia, South Carolina, won a national championship on this body of water. And you've probably got more April, maybe late March, April experience on this body of water than any other tournament series we've seen history of, because a lot of those happen in late May and into the summertime.
That's a good point, Ronnie. You really don't see many big tournaments on Lake Murray in April. I don't know why. Growing up, we fished a bunch of Fisher's-Men, the Cats, stuff like that there, but there was never a Costa. There was never a Bassmaster Open. There was never any of those big level tournaments to draw that crowd there. And I think that's why Lake Murray's been fishing phenomenal lately. It's kind of the hidden gem because of the pressure. Only to the last 2 years when MLF finally took that tour event there, and then BBT just went there. Now we're about to.
It's crazy how that happens, right? Yeah.
Yeah, what a coincidence.
It is a coincidence.
But thank y'all for having me. I'm excited to get to Murray, probably almost more than Santee a little bit. Lake Murray is actually where I fished my first ever bass tournament ever. That's where I fished my first 4 tournaments ever. That was just where all the tournaments went out. Just, it's a good lake.
Tell us about that. Tell us that story, because I've heard it before, but your good buddy Bradford Beavers is one who just said, hey, hop in the boat, I believe.
Well, we actually were, his dad and my dad, we always duck hunted together in Arkansas and stuff like that. And Bradford just turned 18, and he was fishing the Fisher's-Men Legacy Division, which is an adult junior format. And he turned 18, so he needed a kid. He needed somebody he could just drag around. And he was like, "Hey, do you bass fish?" And I was like, "No, I do not bass fish." Like I was maybe, I think, going to 6th grade. I showed up with 5 spinning rods. And I said, I don't even know what to tie it on. I think I had like a saltwater grub, maybe like a sabiki rig. And he was like, all right, you got to cut that stuff off. And I can remember that day to a T. Like I remember, the blast off going out of Dreher Island. The smell of those 2 strokes. We were in a little 17-foot Stratus with a 90 Johnson on there. And we didn't go anywhere in a hurry, but I'm telling you, just those memories, it like sticks with you. And I knew that day when I went home, I said, Dad, we got to get into bass fishing. I was like, hands down, I was like, that was the coolest thing I've ever done, ever.
Did you guys win the legacy event?
We did not. I think we came in the top 10 though. Me and Bradford, we need to go back and look at it. We went on a tear there for a while.
What year was that? Because I fished the Legacy Series for the Carolinas with my dad, and I remember specifically fishing Lake Murray, and that was where I learned how to throw a fluke. And we fished a Legacy Series tournament. We might have been in the same tournament, and we didn't even know each other, because I was probably 6th grade, 7th grade, that same age.
Yeah, it probably was. Because that's when Al was having all those tournaments up there. I guarantee we have to go back and look at the dates. We probably fished against each other.
God, just imagine if I beat Patrick Walters in his first tournament ever. That'd be the last time.
We're gonna have to go back and look at the stats.
Because theoretically, who do we think won that tournament back? That was.
Yeah, I showed up with 5 spinning rods, so there was probably a good chance.
All Ronnie did was throw a crankbait with his dad, according to everything I've ever heard about him and his dad fishing together.
If they weren't biting a Crystal Cross speed trap or a pearl fluke, we were just screwed. Or the albino fluke, we were screwed.
Murray, though, what else do you need though? Old Crystal Crawl, burn the bank, and then that fluke though. Like Murray special.
Something that we were talking about a little bit before you jumped on is it seems like, Lake Murray obviously has always been a good lake, but it seems like in the last, handful of years, it's really taken off to at least the majority of the fishing community. People are starting to take notice to it, even before some of the bigger tournaments, started going there. What do you think it is that kind of made the lake take off a little bit, if you would, or has it even,
Oh, it definitely has taken off. I mean, I'd say in the last 4 years is where it's really started to skyrocket. And I think it's due to the presence of grass in the lake. There's been some offshore grass. That's why we actually had a winter drawdown up there this year. And they took it down 8 feet, just trying to kill this grass off. I don't know what the name of the grass is. It's some kind of just pond weed. It's got a real curly cue. There's a different other types of grass in there as well. Um, that, and I just think the lack of big tournament on the body of water itself. I mean, tournaments do take a toll on a fishery, not necessarily like it doesn't hurt that fishery, but it makes it tougher to catch the fish. They're still in there, but the weights don't show it in tournaments. But pre-spawn the last 2 or 3 years there, I mean, if you didn't have 20 pounds, you were not even going to get a check. Not you didn't have a chance to win. I mean, it was 25 to 29 pounds every time. I mean, from January to March, that's what's kind of surprising. I mean, we'll see the weights fall off in April, fish get a little postponed, but you'll see the consistency through the field. Everybody's going to have 15 pounds. Everybody, probably 15 to 17 pounds. Would not surprise me. Cut will probably be still 17 pounds, and it'll probably take 18 and a half to win. Like, it'll be that tight.
That's why I just talked to a couple Elite Series pros who went in pre-practice there, and they said, you know how when you launch at, this body of water and you have a guaranteed 9 pounds in your bag and you just have to get to 13 or 14, he's like, we're going to launch and have a guaranteed 14, then we got to get up to 17 or 18 pounds. So that sounds exactly right. And somebody said it, they called it just based off pre-practice and how tournaments have been. They said this could be the Lake Champlain of the South in terms of how many fish, how many good fish, and really how good the weights are down through the field. So I'm excited about that. And one thing about it is April is, we were talking about this off camera and things like that, of April in the Carolinas is really when things stabilize. We see classics in March at Hartwell, and it starts to get, you got 3 or 4 patterns there. It starts to explode with the spawning fish, so close to doing that around the classic time. When we get to the Carolinas in April, explain that, Patrick, because there's so many things you can do. You still have those spawners, but then other patterns come into play as well. All those different bait fish spawns that could kind of intertwine with each other.
100%. I'd say April is the best month to fish anywhere in the South, probably. I mean, from Texas to Virginia, but especially in the Carolinas. And the reason I think that is because the weather has finally stabilized. The cold fronts are kind of over. We're getting out of that rain a little bit, so the lakes are starting to get average. And the thing is February, March, a lot of the fish to the bank are just going to be the bass. Like, they'll get pushed up there when the wind blows and they're eating shad or something, but they're the first ones to the bank going to spawn. And then once they get up there, then the shad finally want to spawn, then the herring want to spawn, then the brim come up there to spawn, and then they stay up there. Even after the bass get done spawning, the bait's constantly coming to them. And so now that the water temperature's right, the lake's level, the conditions are normal, you don't have these crazy fluctuations of barometric pressure as well. I mean, I think that does take a toll on them. And so they kind of level out. They've been up there for like 2 or 3 weeks, and they're like, all right, it's time to start eating. So, like, once everything they get done spawning and stuff, they're still going to be fish coming, still fish spawning, and fish like kind of backing out, but the fish are literally everywhere on the lake, and you can catch them doing anything for Santee and Murray, even Hartwell, like you're saying. I mean, you can go skip docks in the back of a pocket. You can skip main lake docks. You can fish points. You can fish brush. I mean, you can go run up the river and throw a spinner bait. It's just like every fish in the lake turns on. I don't know where they come from.
Well, one thing we had kind of mentioned earlier as well is the fact that, it seems like exactly like you said, there's going to be a lot of different things in play, a lot of different patterns, techniques, things of that nature. Do you think to have success, sustained success for 4 days, you're going to have multiple things going? Or do you think that, by the end of it, there's going to be one thing that's just, significantly stronger than the others?
I think it's going to be a thing of a tournament of doing multiple things, but you can kind of do one thing, say like shallow water junk fishing. Like David Williams, top 5, I think, that FLW tournament 2 years ago, and just fishing the bank. I mean, you threw a buzz bait, threw a frog, threw a swim jig, but you're kind of junk fishing because there's so many fish in the lake, like we talked about. You just have to stay busy. So if you want to herring fish, you can run points all day and do that, but you're not going to be able to do it on one spot. You're not going to be able to do it on two spots. Like every day the spots are going to move, and that whether you're bed fishing's still going to play. We had just had a cold snap. The last 3 days it was like 48, 44 degrees in the morning, which was good. We really needed that to kind of slow things down. This season's been progressed way faster than I projected it to be. I mean, I typically at Murray, everything kind of kicks off middle of April. Like April 16th is kind of like the date on the calendar you have circled. And then when MLF went there, I know everybody was watching live. It was kind of surprising what those fish were doing. I mean, they're already eating bait. There's some post spawn. There's a lot pre spawn, and that's why the fish were just confused. And the weights were phenomenal. So I think once we get there and everything kind of start to stabilize, still a lot of fish on bed, fish start to eat again. I, I mean, I think it's going to be good, but you just have to you have to stick to what you want to do and then kind of junk fish on that pattern. That sounds weird, but it's like if you're going to be fishing shallow water, you need to run shallow all day. Like if you're fishing docks, you stick to docks. I mean, it's because they're going to bite on that. There's every bite you want to fish at Murray is there. You just have to fish it enough to catch them, if that makes sense. Long-winded, but
no, it does. And that's how much do you take away from watching, another pro tour just a few weeks before? I feel like that was probably your worst nightmare, even though you got the
100%
benefit from it.
that was the most
Ugh,
cringeworthy
dude.
thing I have ever watched. I mean, mainly because it's like, oh my God, he's on that spot. Like they're there. And then you're like, oh, well, it's frustrating because you don't get many tournaments in your home state, especially certain times of year. And like you just chomp at a bit for that kind of stuff. And then you see that and you're just like, I mean, because it's public knowledge. And I mean, these guys who fish the elite series, they're going to do everything they can to catch fish. When they get to that body of water, they're going to know as much about that body of water as the locals do. And it's because they do their homework. They do their research. They're going to watch live. They're going to read articles. They're going to look at Facebook posts. And that's how these guys catch them. And so with that tournament going on, it was, yeah, I wish they wouldn't have had it.
It shortens the learning curve because if they have
absolutely,
if they don't have that tournament, you got preconceived notions or no notions, and it takes you a day 100%. And a half, 2 days of practice to figure it out. But if you already have a clue, and when I say clue, 6 days of video proof, then you're already going into day one of practice with a set. I'm going to go here, 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 and then they really narrow it down. But for you, are there still some things that Carolina guys or Murray folks who have fished here, are there still not secrets, but just little intricacies that you guys can do here or there that don't get shown on live, or maybe you see it happen, but the fans aren't watching the right thing or the anglers aren't watching the right thing, but you notice something that the guy was doing, you're like, that might be a thing that I keep quiet?
Absolutely. There's always little things. I mean, because everybody fishes things different. And that's the one thing about watching live is taken away from how somebody else fishes something. But yeah, I wouldn't say everybody gets minute with tackle. I mean, everybody's tackle is top notch. I mean, they're spending their time. Everything's going to be rigged. Somebody's going to be throwing 6-pound line. You're not going to out finesse Taku. So it's mainly, I think the Carolina thing is mental. It's knowing how to catch the fish and just keep fishing until you catch them.
Yeah, knowing what
and
clouds
not waiting them out
or knowing what sun,
100%.
You might.
And so it's just staying mentally confident. I mean, because fishing is 60% mental. I mean, it's 40% getting out there and being able to fish and moving around and landing the fish, but it's making the decision to go to this spot here or stay here this long. Like, oh, no, I need to stay another 10 minutes. And then you just magically catch them. It's just those decisions. And so having knowledge on bodies of water like that, especially Murray at that time of year, knowing kind of what to look for or when a spot's going to get better or when a spot's going to fizzle out, that kind of stuff.
One thing I was going to ask, so it seems like anytime we have a guy on to preview, a certain lake, it seems like the home field advantage is never as strong as it should be if it was another time of the year. Not that it really matters, but what would be like your preferred time to have a tournament on Murray for like significant advantage? Because it seems like being that it's in the end of April, like you said, there's going to be so many things going on, so many things that like even somebody that's a local couldn't tap into all those things just because they know them. There's just not enough time and things like that. Like what would be your, preferred time of the year for a tournament?
April. I mean, if I had to choose one, April, I'd want to go a little bit earlier. That way it's like, it's not popping off. I mean, because if it's the whole lake's firing, everybody's going to catch them. But if it's like little areas, like the subtle stuff, that's where you can kind of make a difference. So I would go a little bit earlier in April, but April, I love April. I mean, if you go in the fall, everybody would catch them too, just kind of going down the bank, throwing a whopper plopper or buzzbait. And if it wasn't early April or mid-April, I would say probably in February. That crystal crawl. Ronnie knows about it because when they're on that bite, it is good, and that would just be fun. I mean, if we took a classic there, it would break the
Ooh.
records. I mean, it'd be 25 a day, no doubt.
That's
To
what,
win.
talking to some of the guys, I know, Cherry and Williams and Lineberger and all of those guys, definitely they have a lot of those North Carolina, South Carolina tournaments at Murray there. And the possibility of breaking 100 pounds for an elite event in February is higher percentage than people would think. What do you think the
100%.
weight could be here this week in mid to late April? Probably a little more post-spawn fish than we thought, but with that cold front backing up some stuff and then a warming trend, maybe we have a bigger wave come up, maybe to the bank they rush. So we'll have a little bit of everything, but do you think the weights stay strong and we can, keep it mid 80s to, something like
I'm
that?
thinking 80 to 85. Absolutely. Water level's good right now. It's coming back up. Everything's stable. We had a front last night that come through, but it wasn't even that bad. It broke up. Really didn't get that much rain. Um, I'm seeing 80 to 85. I mean, 20 a day, that's pretty stout post spawn, no matter where you go.
Can you explain Lake Murray for us? So I was talking to Kyle about this, and it's a big lake on the, when I always do like you trace around the lake and all the creeks, and then I have like the cut out of the lake. I'm like, this is a honking lake, and
If you
really,
started tracing it, it probably took a long time, didn't it?
it's they don't have a bunch of main feeder creeks, but it's a bunch of
Correct.
fingers and a bunch of pockets and a bunch of things like that. And you've got the big and little Saluda, but explain the lake and how it breaks down and how you kind of chop it up, in your opinion of, I guess you got the dam area, you got the river area, but then there's a lot of real estate in between.
I compare it to like a Lake Hartwell mixed with a Smith Lake, and then but it's a little bit wider. That's what I say. And they're like, "What do you mean a little bit wider?" I'm just like, it's a true Carolina lake. It's got mass to it. When you get out in the open lake, it's actually a good ways across. Like if the wind picks up, it's gonna get rough. I break the lake down. It's in thirds. You got upriver, which is basically from Dreer Island up. You got mid lake, which is around Dreer, kind of to Bear Creek, a little bit south of Bear, and then down lake towards the dam, the very bottom of the lake. And how it breaks down basically is like the upper third is where the shad majority live. That's where your shad spawn goes down. That's where you got the colored water. That's where you'll see the guys. It, like you said, it's got two rivers that feed it. It's a little bit more dirtier water. And it's a lot shallower, so it warms up a lot quicker. And then as you get to mid lake, you still got a little bit of color, but it starts to clear up. Lake starts to open up a little bit. Then you get more of those bigger creeks. You got Hollow Creek, you got Crystal Lake, all that, Macedonia. And then as you get further down is when it gets gin clear, a lot deeper waters where all the stripers are. Bigger area. That's where I would say, I don't even know where I was probably going with that. But how I look at the southern reservoirs in general
Like
is
half
like,
the anglers or something are going to be, or
no, I have no idea. I was thinking about something. I was like, nah, I'm probably not going there. But the
trying to
bigger
get
fish
some
always live
secrets.
in the south on the lower end, but there's not as many. The population's not there because it's deeper water, not as many spawning areas as up river. There's always more fish, but not usually the average isn't as big. And so that's the thing. If you go upriver, you might catch 30 fish, and if you go down, you might catch 6. But the weight's the difference. That's the thing. It's Murray's a fantastic lake where you can truly spread out. I think it's what 50,000 acres, but it fish is huge. I mean, because it's like if you look at Hartwell, you kind of see everybody. They fish up the rivers a little bit, but the rivers don't ever truly play 10 miles north of
They
up
don't
there.
absorb a lot
It's
of people. Yeah.
They don't. It's always that mid lake, down lake area where Murray's kind of the whole thing. I wouldn't say anybody's going to go 20 miles or 15 miles way upriver. Somebody will go up there and catch them on a spinnerbait the first day, but I don't see it lasting unless it's a crazy good shad spawn up there, which is liable to happen. I mean, I'm going to go up there and check because that's how you differentiate yourself. Everybody, what research they've done. And like you said, if they were watching that MLF, nobody's seen that. So there's always something different to be had.
It kind of brings it to a point I was thinking about earlier. How much pressure does it put on you in practice? Not even necessarily being like a local or, kind of a hometown favorite, but more so in the sense that that like an early bite could potentially be really big. How much pressure does that put on you for 3 days of practice? Because like your time is so limited to find the deal. Like, like how much pressure does that put on you during practice?
I love and hate fishing home lake tournaments, which Murray's not really a home lake, but I consider it basically my second home lake. I mean, that's definitely the closest one compared to Santee, but it is so stressful because you, everybody's like, oh, he's got to catch them. So you have that, you have to perform, you have to catch them. But then it's like you have all that knowledge, like you're saying, of the lake, and you're trying to look for that stuff. You're trying to look for the home run, and like you said, time is so limited. Like you want to go check the spot, but you're like, well, I don't really want to be seen on that. But it's like, well, if I don't check it, I don't know. It's like they could be schooling, they could not be schooling, they could be spawning in this pocket. But it's like it's so hard to make that decision of what to fish, what not to fish. That's why I already pulled my boat wrap off. So we're gonna be good to go. No, I'm just kidding. I thought about it just in case, but that'd probably give me some bad karma. I probably wouldn't catch them.
Yeah, you unwrap and then rewrap 2 days later just for unless you just take the fine. But that's another subject we're not allowed to get into on this thing.
We're gonna keep it PG.
So we were talking about breaking down the lake. You're talking about fish schooling here, fish schooling there, the timing of where you even try to practice a spot. Can you explain to the viewers and fans at home what the herring spawn is, the blueback herring spawn, maybe how long it lasts, where it goes down and the timing of it, because there are times where those herring are nothing but on the run, like they're always going. And so are they going to be going, up and down a point? Are they going to be going point to point to point? Are they going to stay in a 5-mile stretch, but you don't know where you're going to find them that day? Like, what is it for you to try to capitalize on that bite early in the morning or late in the day, whenever?
It's typically they spawn first thing in the morning, just like shad. It's very similar to a shad spawn, but the thing is, I don't know what happens to a shad spawn after the first couple hours where the shad just vacate and they just kind of leave. The herring, the difference is they kind of stay there. They're going to stay on that one point or in that general area. And like I said, they're just going to go up and down. They're just going to kind of swim around, and then they'll swim over a key spot, and then the fish will be there waiting on them. And that's why you can kind of still catch those fish all day long compared to shad spawn fish, where those fish are just, they're done. I mean, you got an hour, and then you might as well go flip a jig somewhere and do something else. But the biggest difference I would say is, shad, they'll spawn, they like hard cover and all that stuff, but they like grass a lot. Shad love grass, treetop, stuff like that, where herring are way more like hard cover for some reason. That's why you always hear about the clay, you hear about rock, stuff like that. You don't really find typically a herring spawn going on in grass. I don't know what it is, and it's in clear water. That's why it doesn't happen. Shad or herring do not like tannic water. They do not like dirty, dingy, any of that stuff. That's why it doesn't happen up the lake. That's why just a couple miles above Dreher Island, they don't live up there. That's why it's more shad based forage. But they stay in that general area. They're going to stay on that point or in that wherever that spot is, and they kind of go up and back and forth. They're not really going to leave that point and go 5 points over. It's just each point will just have like that little group of them, and then that's why the fish just kind of stay with them.
One thing I wanted to ask about, I saw your video that you did making your fantasy fishing picks for this event, and that kind of made me want to ask you, I guess just for the viewers so much, maybe that haven't, watched any events at Lake Murray, don't know a whole lot about it, just kind of give an idea of some of the baits that we'll play, not necessarily things you're going to throw, but just things that like we can expect, because you pick some guys, for your theoretical fantasy team that like are good at certain things that you might not expect, to play there. So give us kind of a rundown of that if you could.
Yeah, all the baits.
Go ahead, Ronnie.
All the baits from second to 103rd, since we know you're not going to tell your baits in first.
Right. Listen, I'm going to keep it simple. I've been playing with tackle for the last 3 nights. Like, I'm not even gonna tell you what time I went to bed last night because it was bad. But I've been tinkering with tackle, and you always think you're just gonna find that one edge, that one difference, whether it's a color, whether it's a size, whether it's something new or something old you're bringing back out. I mean, just like those kind of history things. But it's mainly like we said earlier. It's mental of going out there and knowing what spots to fish. Like I'm gonna keep it simple. I thought about getting carried away. It's gonna be simple baits. I'm not gonna pull something out and it'd be like, what's that? I mean, I probably will, but we're not gonna talk about that yet. But I'd say it's gonna be a fun tournament to watch because sight fishing's still gonna play. There's still a lot of fish on the bank. Um, there's going to be wolf packs starting to form after those fish too, because the brim are going to be getting up there. So you'll be able to sight fish. A guy like J Pros, people who throw wacky worm. There's good water willow in the lake. There's good shallow grass. So guys who like to throw swim jig, buzz bait, and then like you got the Carolina guys like Cobb, people throwing top water, throwing the flukes, that kind of stuff. And honestly, I could easily see a worm dragger top 10 in. I mean, somebody with a Carolina rig or a shaky head. I mean, just finessing down and just slowing down in some of those areas, and you catch fish. We all get carried away, and you want to catch them on top water and rip baits through there, but you got to, each school's different. You just got to kind of find what each one likes. A school has a personality, basically. I don't know why. One school eat this, one school won't eat that. And so it's once you think you get one bait and lock it in your hand and run over the entire lake, and that can be true sometimes, but it's typically not the case. That's why, I mean, growing up in the Carolinas, I mean, you see every time I go to a tournament, I got 20 rods on deck, and everybody gives me a hard time about it, but it's like, that's what you do.
You got to be ready in the Carolinas for sure, especially on those herring fish. We were talking about where the lake sets up, the shallow deals, but I haven't heard any offshore stuff. And when I'm saying offshore, I'm talking about more than maybe two full bomb casts from the bank. You know, you could be on a point and be a couple casts off the bank, but will we see any? I know that the cane's a deal in the summer. Does cane only factor in the summer? Are offshore brush piles going to be a deal? Is there someone in 20 feet of water going to be able to win this event or compete? Or is it just because it's April, we're going to have majority percentage of the fish, you know, towards the 5 feet or less?
Majority, I'm going to say 95% of the fish are going to be in 7 foot and less. You'll be able to catch them 7 to 10. I mean, especially, I mean, because the herring it's pelagic. Is it pelagic or pelagic? Because I always call it pelagic, and Hamner, if he calls it pelagic, and that's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
Well, I think it's pelagic.
Thank you.
I went to East Carolina. You went to South Carolina. Pelagic. He went to Arkansas. I'm going to trust us over a guy who, you know, is
Kyle. What do you say it is?
Tuscaloosa.
Pelagic. Yeah, I've never heard it. I've never heard it the other way around.
I hadn't either, and I was like, I'm sorry to get off subject, but when I was thinking about that, I was like,
too,
we get in an argument about it every time, and I'm like, hey, what are you talking about? Like, you're talking about like a spice you just put on food or something at an Italian restaurant. Like, no, we're not doing that. But what were we even talking about?
Offshore.
Offshore, yeah. What was the question? I don't see anybody catching them in 20 feet, basically.
Pelagic fish.
Somebody, because they are pelagic fish. Thank you, Ronnie. Somebody's got to keep us on track. They might swim and they'll chase that herring sometimes. So they might get over 20 foot of water, but they're not going to be 5 foot deep. That's the thing. And so then they'll circle back to the point and they'll come back. But nobody's going to catch them really in the cane, I don't think, or in the brush. The brush deal is real good wintertime, summertime. Hot conditions, cold conditions, but other than that, I mean, you know, pre-spawn too. I mean, you just catch them 4 foot and less. I mean, that's just chase the wind. That's where the fish are living. And so April, that time of year as well, when the fish are spawning, everything's typically in 7 foot and less.
Before we, you know, let you go in just a minute or two, I wanted you to explain as well the uniqueness of Lake Murray. As we go to a lot of largemouth lakes where you're not going to target any other species. There's no spotted bass, there's no smallmouth. But every time we go to a blueback herring lake, there's always the influx of spotted bass in the game plan. And Kyle and I talk about this all the time, is that, yeah, you have 2 game plans. I'm going to go catch 5 spotted bass off a point, and I'm going to go in the back of a pocket and specifically target largemouth. Is that why Lake Murray has the opportunity to be so dynamic, is the fact that it's all largemouth and you can go change your baits and mindset, but you're fishing for the same quality of fish. I'm just not fishing for a 5-pounder off a point anymore. I'm fishing up in a pocket. And I said it kind of reminded me of Clark's Hill, because you could do it there too as well, where you kind of ignore spotted bass or that kind of style, and you're just selling out deep or shallow for the same species, the same, you know, train of thought fish.
Well, typically it's like a lake. If you look at like a pie chart, it's like it's going to have only a certain amount of fish in that lake, no matter what. And so whether the spotted bass take it over, whether it's 80% spotted bass, 20% largemouth, or 50-50. And so when you have herring in there, those spots are so aggressive, they usually take over the herring bite because I mean, spotted bass is like the meanest thing you've ever seen. Like if you looked him in the eye wrong, he'd probably slap you. Like you just don't cross a spotted bass. And so I mean, cold front, that is the most consistent fish to catch because he's always going to bite. And that's why they love herring so much. And you think of herring lakes, you think of spotted bass because they're going to get out there and chase them. They don't need to be around a brush pile. They don't need to be around a dock or a pocket. And so when we go to those lakes, that's the majority of those fish get taken up offshore. And then you have a couple largemouth. But the good thing with Murray, it's the same amount of fish, but they're all largemouth. And so that's why it's fishing so good. I mean, those fish get bigger. They're chasing bait. They're up shallow still. It's just the same amount of fish in the lake. It's just they're only largemouth. And so that's why you're saying you can catch a 5-pounder offshore, catch a 5-pounder up shallow. It's like you said, the same fish. You're not like, well, these are only going to be spotted bass. No, you have the same chance of catching a big one no matter where you go on that lake. And that's what makes it so good because those largemouth are doing nothing but swimming around with their mouths open, eating.
That's what's
All
cool.
day.
You won't know if David Williams, when he brings in 5 largemouth, if he was throwing a popper in a pocket or if he was fishing
Exactly.
off a
If we
point. You
went to
just don't
Smith, you'd be like, he probably swam a jig under a dock, He definitely was not on a point dragging a shaky head. But at Murray,
Exactly.
you're just like,
Yeah.
you basically got to tell by like, what does he like to do? If Jay Pross catches him, he probably caught him on a wacky worm, I mean, it's typical. I mean, so you kind of go back to the old school ways of what do people like to do?
Is there any truth to Shane Beamer is going to be at the weigh-in singing the national anthem on Saturday? Is that true or is that not true?
I don't know. I hope so. We'll find out. We'll see what Shane's got. I mean, I'm
Hey,
skeptical.
I've only seen him in viral YouTube videos and social media videos singing other songs with a mic hanging down in the locker room, not the national anthem. Maybe Kyle.
Did you see his latest one though with the office bloopers?
Speed limit.
That was actually pretty funny. I
Hilarious.
was like, dang, that was pretty good. Yeah, I'm not big on the microphone and the singing, but that one was like, okay, I can get on board with that one.
Yeah, that was good stuff.
Hey, SEC though, we're getting ready for some college football. I mean, when you're in Columbia, I mean, man.
Yeah, the hype is up there, but I just don't know how a guy like you deals with himself when he says roll tide half the year and then you live over here and now you're like, there's a reason for you to say go Cox.
Well, it's like a safe way of saying hell yeah. That's the only reason you say roll tide. It's just like roll tide. I mean, you can't be like go Cox. I mean, like you just don't say that in a group. I mean, they'd be like, "What are you talking about? Just roll tide." I mean, it's so much easier to
It's
say.
the
And nobody really
amen of the
questions
South.
it.
Yeah, it's the
It
amen.
really is. It's just that much easier. I mean, I'm pulling for Carolina, but it's man, just roll tide. Just it flows too smooth. We've all said it at least 10 times. We know it.
Oh, 100%.
You can't help but say it every once in a while. Patrick, I noticed there's a turkey on your shirt. Did you go turkey hunting this morning? And if so, did you have any luck?
I did go turkey hunting this morning, and it duped me this morning. I had one roosted. We went yesterday morning as well, Dad and I, and sucker got us. I mean, we were gonna go back and get him this morning, but he switched trees. He roosted like 600 yards away, and he was 100 yards across the property line on the neighbor's property, and he gobbled all morning. Like, I mean, it was nonstop, and I'm like, we're so close. And then, we'd hit him with a call a little bit, and then he stayed in the tree for another like 45 minutes after daylight. Like he was sitting there. I don't know what he was doing, but I'm telling you, he was pacing back and forth on that limb. And when he finally got on the ground, he called one time and then was done. Radio silence. He's paired up with a bunch of hens right now. I mean, we could probably go back and get him at like 11 o'clock once he breaks off those hens, but that was probably my last one of the season. So it's I might get one more after Santee, but just hey, it's turkey season. You got to do what you can.
I'll say this: if you had your live scope and your hydrowave on, you would have totally called him in. I'm just saying.
Oh, hey, I would have smoked him.
It
wouldn't even have been fair. I'd have been closer than
that,
100 yards.
I was going through some classic footage, and Wes Miller had a drone shot flying from up in the field, I guess down the lake, over to one of the anglers. And on the way, he stops and goes down, and there is a giant turkey. I mean, just just whole decked out, just chasing
Blowed
two or
up, fired up.
and I mean, I'm not a hunter at all, so I didn't measure, his neck hair or whatever they call it. I didn't see his talon size. I don't know if it's a good one, but he was a big boy, and he was flared up at that drone, and I was wanting to see him attack it. But
I mean, listen, if he's old enough to talk, he's old enough to catch some lead. That's all I gotta say. If he's blowed up in that field and he's showing off, listen, bring him.
he can get it.
I am not prejudiced on him. Okay, if
That's
he's
funny.
talking and he's strutting, I'm shooting.
Last thing I wanted to ask you, Patrick, before we let you go, any thoughts on Santee? You don't have to give a full-blown preview, but we were there in March, 100 pounds, sight fishing. I feel like it might not hit 100 pounds, but there's going to be a lot more fish on the bank, if that makes sense.
100%. I think there's going to be way more fish on the bank. I think the weights overall will be great. I mean, I can't say better than last time because last time the weights were still phenomenal. I think it took 17 and a half to get a check. I still think it could take 100 if everything went right. I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't. No. I mean, I'm predicting like 90, 92 pounds, somewhere in there, post spawn. But everybody's going to catch fish. Everybody's going to start with 14 to 15 pounds there as well. The difference with Santee and Murray's you're going to catch 25 to 30 fish to get to 15 pounds, where Santee's you're going to catch 7. That's just it's the difference in fishing, really. If you set the hook on Santee 5 times, you're going to catch a 5-pounder. I mean, that's just how it is. And at Murray, you set the hook 5 times, they were all 3-pounders. So it's just difference in fishing, but it's going to be a great tournament. I'm excited about it. That's my favorite month to fish Santee, hands down. Santee Cooper in April is. But see, they both got me fired up. That's why I got a turkey hunt. That way I can get my mind off of it. Because if I'm thinking about it, it's bad.
That's what I was going to ask. Was we've been there now. This will be the 3rd time at Santee Cooper for the Elite Series recently. One in the fall, one in March, and then late April. Is this the best time out of those 3 to show off some local advantage, or was it the fall one? Because it kind of gets.
I should have caught him in the fall one.
You know?
The fall one, I probably was slacking a little bit. The fall is definitely the time where you can kind of do some things and kind of like catch some fish that other people might not be doing. But everything has to set up. When it's your time, it's your time. But April, especially the middle to the end April, is, I mean, they're everywhere on the bank. You can go swim a jig. I mean, in the dirt, you can go swim a jig at 5 foot. I mean, they're in the grass, they're in the swamp, they're in the lower lake. Everything plays. I mean, that's why I like that time of year, because everybody's going to be catching fish, and it shouldn't be too crowded, honestly. Like, it won't be one creek, I mean, Potato's still going to freaking show out again like it always does, but it won't be 13 boats in one little pocket.
Yeah.
They'll be in the whole entire creek.
Jack, Swamp, Utah,
Absolutely.
Moultrie. Yeah, you'll have all kinds of stuff. Awesome. Well, Patrick Walters, our guest today, previewing Lake Murray. He's also the tour guide at Santee Cooper, telling all the elites how to run so they do not shear their motor off their boat. So appreciate your help in that. And Kyle, you got anything else for Patrick before we let him go?
Last thing I've got is theoretically not for me, but for somebody out there. If you could only use Patrick Walters for this tournament or the Santee Cooper tournament for Drain the Lake, what are we running with?
Like, that's a hard one.
Not me, just somebody.
I really don't know, to tell you the truth. I think they're both a toss-up. Like, both of them get me fired up, and I'm excited to fish both of them. I may not get a check, but I'm telling you, I'm gonna have a blast. Like, it's gonna be fun. But I like my chances at both of them.
Kyle, how about we're gonna do
Drain the
rock,
Lake,
paper, scissors, and
we'll
pick one of
save
the
that
other.
for up north.
No, I'm not putting you. No. We've learned that lesson. You're getting better though. You're getting better though. Patrick Walters, our guest today on the Inside Bassmaster Podcast, presented by Black Rifle Coffee Company. Appreciate you, Patrick. Be safe. Practice starts on Monday for the Elite Series event at Lake Murray, and then we will see 4 days of action. That we'll probably see Patrick Walters day 1 on camera, if I had to guess, since I helped make that list. I'd assume that would be true. So bring the goods, and we will all be watching.
I like it. Thank you, guys. If y'all need anything, y'all know where to find me.
Awesome. See you, Patrick.
See y'all.
Kyle, talking to Patrick Walters, there's a reason that we had him as the preview for Lake Murray. Yes, there's a bunch of South Carolina guys around there that have experience at Murray, but man, fishing in college right there in Columbia, 4 straight years, won a national championship there. and he's going to be one of the bona fide favorites when it comes to Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing. So there's no better reason to have him preview it. And we're going to have a little extra sneak peek guest for Santee Cooper that maybe people wouldn't consider to be local, knowledgeable person there. And we'll have to tell the fans about that later on. But that brings us to fantasy fishing. Why don't we just go ahead and jump right in, and we'll do what we've been doing. Just give me your 5 Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing picks for Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing, and then we'll get into Mercury Drain the Lake. But we'll just go 5 from you, 5 from me, and then we'll go back and forth on Drain the Lake. So kick us off with Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing.
Yeah, when it comes to, Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing, you and I both are kind of in a little bit of a rut here. I think most everybody that I've talked to, pundits and people of that nature are a little bit behind the 8 ball this year. But I'm going with the same approach I always take, with a mixture of, some high percentage guys that, you think will definitely hit here. And then some lower percentage guys think people may not be thinking of. So right off the jump, bucket A, I got Drew Cook in bucket A. There are plenty of good candidates in bucket A. There always is. There always will be. But something about it, I think he'll be able to mix the two between herring spawn and spawning fish. Fishing shallow, fishing off the bank, whatever it may take. Bucket B, I've got our guest on the show today, Patrick Walters, and just about everybody else does too. But that was pretty well to be expected. But that's one of those risks, as far as high percentage, I don't mind taking it all. I think, it's really not a risk, I guess, kind of a chalk pick, really. Bucket C, I've got KJ Queen. I don't know why, but just the beginning of the year, I just thought this is a tournament, a time of the year, everything that sets up so well for KJ Queen. Obviously, being a North Carolina guy, I imagine his fish there in some cat tournaments and things of that nature. So pretty confident about KJ Queen. Moving down to bucket D, how often do you get the chance to choose in bucket D from Jason Christie? Let's see, Seth Fider, Brandon Polnick, Brandon Lester, Jacob Peraz. I mean, the names are loaded, but nonetheless, I'm taking Brandon Polnick. I don't think you're ever going to get a chance this year to take Brandon Polnick in bucket D. Somehow he's still not even the highest, picked angler in the bucket. So going with Brandon Polnick in D. In bucket E, I think you'll appreciate this pick. I'm going with your guy, David Williams. I think you talk about a guy that can go fish docks, can go fish, herring spawn lakes. I think has proved that on so many levels at different lakes. I think David Williams is a sneaky pick in E. And it seems like it wouldn't be that sneaky other than the fact that he's at 1.2% right now. So that is my lineup. I'll go through it one more time. We got bucket A, Drew Cook. Bucket B, Patrick Walters. Bucket C, KJ Queen. Bucket D, Brandon Polnick. And bucket E, David Williams.
Kyle, I'm loving your team and the rationale behind it. And I did, some of that strategy when you talk about Drew Cook in bucket A, some of that strategy of thinking about sight fishing. It's hard not to use the Cooks in Drain the Lake or Cook and Benton and Drain the Lake for Okeechobee, Seminole, or Santee Cooper, like places that they've had success, that they live near, and then places they've won at. But man, saving some of those guys for Murray. Murray's going to be probably the last big explosion of sight fishing that we could possibly see. Santee should have some of that, but also a lot of post spawn, moving bait by a lot of different things for Santee. But we'll get into that next week in the next episode. But on that same train of thought, I picked some of those guys for Drain the Lake as well, but we do match up pretty dang good in Rapala Bassmaster Fantasy Fishing for a couple buckets. Normally we're never the same, but we duplicate quite a bit, but we do not duplicate in bucket A, where I went with Kyle Welcher. I think that Kyle Welcher is probably one of the best April fishermen that is on the Elite Series, and I'll even classify a mid-March to early May, mid-March to early May, that, month and a half time period, I would say Kyle Welcher is one of the top tier anglers just because he does keep a lot of things honest. So Kyle Welcher is my bucket A pick there for Lake Murray. Bucket B, I'm matching with you, Patrick Walters. I really expected him to be a higher percentage. I don't know if people are just thinking that he's a Santee Cooper kid, but he's probably lived just as much time recently near Columbia and the University of South Carolina and Lake Murray than he has necessarily, since he's been on the Elite Series, he's been back home towards Santee Cooper, but spent just as much time at Lake Murray for his home lake. And I also think that there are some key little intricacies that Brandon Cobb, Patrick Walters, maybe a Hank Cherry, Todd Auten, David Williams, some of these Carolina guys, Jason Williamson, that will be able to mix in at Murray, that maybe what we saw on TV a few weeks ago or what the anglers expect. It's just a little bit of intricacies around the Herring Lakes and the Carolinas is always key. So Walters there, I really, really highly considered Benton and Blaylock there at 10% and 5%. Really, really thought about Benton and Blaylock, specifically Blaylock, but after I cursed him at the Classic, I'm not going to curse him in Bucket B this week. Bucket C, I went with KJ Queen as well. I like the way some of the percentages are dispersed. Corey Johnson's a huge percentage in this bucket, but I didn't necessarily look at percentages too much this week. I didn't do our normal avoiding guys because of high percentages, but I was more so shocked at some of the people that did have high percentages, and we'll get into that as we get farther into the buckets because there's a couple bona fide like mind blowers there. Bucket D, Jacob Porosnik. You were talking about all of the anglers that just have gotten off to a tougher start this season that we don't expect. Like you said, Christie's and the Fighters and obviously Lester and Polinick. Those guys didn't do so hot at Seminole. Christie didn't do so hot at Okeechobee, and that gets you in Bucket B or Bucket D. I'll also say Chris Zaldain in there as one of the shockers in Bucket D. Watch out, though, in this bucket. I'm picking Jacob Porosnik, but look out for Jason Williamson. I really think that living where he does in South Carolina, it's basically Georgia. It's so far down there at times that he's close to Clark's Hill. And I'll say of all of the lakes that have blueback herring, Clark's Hill is the closest imitator to Lake Murray, in my opinion, because most of the fish you're going to catch there are largemouth. You can go and specifically target those without ever catching spotted bass. And then obviously some of the other lakes on the chain do have spotted bass heavily, and those factor into the blueback herring spawn and that type of deal. But Williamson, Murray has been kind to him in the past. I do believe Clark's Hill has been kind to him in the past. I think that Williamson could translate pretty well to Lake Murray, even though we haven't been there in a long time. But I'm going with Jacob Porosnik in Bucket D. Sight fishing, some of that stuff. The reasons we pick him at Hartwell are some of the reasons I'm picking him here at Murray. Then we go into Bucket E. I'm with you on that one. David Williams. When it comes to value picks, though, he might be at 1.2%. He is in Bucket E, not the best start to the season, but value picks for him at 1.2% compared to a Todd Auten at 8%. Both of them have just as much experience on this body of water. If this was a February tournament, I would put David Williams up there with a top 10 because fishing in February at Murray can get crazy. And the way he likes to fish, it's perfect. But brim beds, shad spawn, herring spawn, cruising the bank, whether you're in a pocket looking for largemouth specifically or you're out on a point, you're going to catch largemouth everywhere you go at Murray. And I like Williams there for the value of 1.2%. I was absolutely shocked. No disrespect to Brian New at all. 70%. I have never seen someone, we say this almost every week, 50% is a shocker to me. 50% is a shocker to me, but 70%, I've never seen one that high in my closest, memory bank for a guy who's not necessarily a local here. Yes, it says Saluda, South Carolina, but he just moved there within the last year or so. He is a Lake Wiley guy, much closer to Lake Hartwell. Yes, we're picking some other local guys because of where they fish, but I would not consider at all Brian New a local here. So I don't know if it's because he's a hot name in Bucket E and it's uncharacteristically struggling the first couple events, but 70% for Brian New, you have to almost guarantee he's got to get a top 10 to kind of counteract everybody else in the bucket. So we will see if we can maybe gain on a lot of the fantasy fishing players by selecting someone different than that. So my 5 anglers: Kyle Welcher, Patrick Walters, KJ Queen, Jacob Porosnik, and David Williams. I'm pretty well suited with that. And, this may turn into a little bit more of a post-spawn event. And I really like some of these guys when it comes to post-spawn, that early post-spawn. Walters has proven it. Welcher has as well. Williams has shined, as like Dardanelle, places like that have been a little post spawn. I really like if it turned into that sneaky top water things. I really like those guys. And then obviously Queen and Porosnik, not too shabby either. So let's jump into Mercury Drain the Lake, where I'm equally as bad as I am in Rapala fantasy fishing this year. I don't know what the deal is. When you pick Brandon Lester and he has his worst finish he has in the last 3 years, you know it's just not your time. And so Seminole was not my time to make up points. But I'm gonna make up points here this week. I do promise you that. So
Yeah,
jump in and give me your first four. I'll jump in and we'll go back and forth.
Yeah, so my lineup shouldn't be a huge shock to anybody based on pretty much almost everybody in the entire 8-man field has a C at the end of their at the end of their state. It's either South Carolina or Northern Carolina, pretty much all of them. But I'm just taking the odds here. I mean, there's going to be a couple of these guys, or maybe a few of these guys that don't have the best performances or as good as they hope, but I'm just taking the odds. I think that a handful of these guys will hit, and that's what I'm going with. So to start out in the first four, I've got Matt Airy, KJ Queen, Jason Williamson, and Brian New.
Say that one more time. Matt Airy, KJ Queen, Jason Williamson, Brian New, right?
Yes, sir.
I like those four. I think I'm saving Airy in the next few events. So I didn't, and I failed to mention him. I've mentioned some of the other North Carolina and South Carolina guys. I failed to mention Matt Airy. This does set up well for his style, I do believe. I'm gonna go.
There's so many of them. That's the thing. There's so many of them. I was the same way when I saw Matt Airy in bucket, I think B or C. I noticed it when I was going back through the buckets, and I was like, man, that's a tough one to justify not picking too. But anyways, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to apologize. There's just a lot of guys you can justify in this tournament.
No, I 100% agree. I do think that Airy will be one to watch. I'm going with a couple. Let's just go. I'm going to go. I'll pick my sight fishing guys, and then I'll give you four other guys. I'm going with John Cox. I'm going with, where are my sight fishing guys? Oh, John Cox, Drew Benton, Jacob Porosnik, and Bradley Hallman. Those are my four guys. I really think we saw a lot of spawning action. They had some cold weather, and then it got really warm again. So I'd expect another wave to kind of get kick-started, rather than if it stayed warm, they'd be coming up here and there. But with it getting cool again for a little bit and then warm again, I'd expect like a full wave to have had time to build together. I think that sight fishing could still be a deal, at least early in this event. So Cox, Benton, Porosnik, and Hallman. People are probably interested why I'm picking Bradley Hallman here, but I just have a hunch. I have a feeling for that. So there's my first four. Who's your last four?
So we actually do have the same pick in John Cox. I have John Cox as well. I don't know why. It's one of those things. I've just been saving him. Like, you could justify picking him in any of the first three tournaments, obviously, but I'm like you. Every year when you get to tournaments this time of year, you think to yourself, the spawn's done. They're already out. They're gone. These guys find them. It could be early June, and there'll be guys find spawning fish. Like, I mean, it's we were talking about this in the office yesterday. I mean, it's weird how a handful of these guys all the way up into May and tournaments you think are completely post spawn will find fish that are up spawning, or in the same areas they spawn, fry garters, whatever it may be, and they just have a knack for catching them.
And I'll say this: you said John Cox, and it reiterates our points. You said you could have picked him in any of the first three events. You could pick John Cox in any of the first 7 events, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
And then with his track record, how good he did at Lake St. Clair, maybe the first 8 events. So picking John Cox this year, just like Greg Hackney, it's really just you just got to line it up perfectly. But any of these first 7 or 8 events, you can pick him.
For sure. So like I said, to round out my last 4, I've got John Cox, Brandon Cobb, David Williams, and Shane LaHue. Those are going to be my last 4.
I like it. You got the buddies and roommates in Cobb and LaHue there. My last 4, I'm going Cobb, Stetson Blaylock, Hank Cherry, and Patrick Walters. I saved Patrick for last. Obviously, he was our guest on the podcast today, but I like Cobb. He hasn't fished there a ton recently, and even though he's in South Carolina, he's more of a Hartwell guy, but he's had success at the Forestwood Cup. That's the summertime. but really knowing some of those little intricacies. There's little things, like I said, not secrets, but just subtleties that some of these herring, they just know day by day, condition by condition. You could think, hey, I need clouds to maybe prolong a shad spawn, whereas they're okay if it gets sunny for this deal or that deal. They can adjust on the fly there. So I like Brandon Cobb, obviously, and then I said Stetson Blaylock. Like Kyle Welcher's reasoning for my Rapala picks, Stetson Blaylock is by far one of the best late March to early May fishermen, that month and a half time period. So I really like Stetson Blaylock to pop off here. Hank Cherry, if it was February, like I mentioned, some of these Carolina guys, I would go all Carolina guys, because I think that there's a good chance that it could get nasty. And honestly, a lot of these guys are saying, hey, if it was February with the way Murray is fishing, how good it's fishing lately, it would have been 120 pounds or 115 pounds. Like, they would have busted over that 100-pound mark. I don't think we're going to get there. I think it's going to be a little bit more post-spawn fish, but I could see that high 80s, maybe low 90s if they really catch a wave of pre-spawn or spawning fish. So like I said, Stetson Blaylock, Brandon Cobb, Hank Cherry, and then Patrick Walters. I think that I don't want this to be a forward-facing sonar event, but I do think that is going to help a lot of anglers out on, filling the weights from that 20th place to 60th place. I think the weights are going to be stacked. And I think it's also because you can see them with your eyes this week. You can find them with your top water, and you'll also be able to see them on some of those shallower points where they're ganging up on, the herring spawn and things like that with your electronics. So some of the guys who may not know what to look for, they may see it just because it gets revealed to them there. But I'd really expect, I expect it every week, but I feel like I got a well-balanced 8-man for my Mercury Drain the Lake. I said I brought the hammer down at Seminole, picking some high and big names, but looking here, like, I didn't even time it this way on purpose, but I feel like I got a pretty stud 8-man lineup there too. So if they all miss the cut, I'm done for the year, Kyle.
We'll know it's the curse then at that point. It's just
we can definitely mention that it's the curse. Well, we've given our fantasy picks. We talked to Patrick Walters. I'm excited for Lake Murray. It's the first time the Bassmaster Elite Series has been here since 2011. We were also there in 2008. We've seen it one up the river. We've seen it one down the lake. All should be a factor this week. You should see certain parts of the lake really pop off with spawning fish at times. There may be parts of the lake are transitioning to more post-spawn, but throughout the lake, we should see spawners happening. We should see visually appealing bites this week. I'm really looking forward to it. And I know I believe you're on the water there again this week. You're just one of the Elite Series full-timers now, but they've got you going everywhere. I know that you're out of town the weekend before as well.
Yeah, looking forward to it. I'm actually not going to this event. This will be the first Elite Series event I haven't gone to, I guess since like 2 years ago, maybe, or so. I'm staying back. I'm actually going to produce for the website. We're a little low on producers for that one. So, I'm going to stay back and help on that, but I'm looking forward to this tournament in general. Obviously you and I have talked about it on the podcast. You kind of get a full realm, like a full view when you're watching it on live versus being there in person, because, in a day I might cover 2-3 people at most. Actually, I say that 5-6 people at most, but still, that only gives you so good of an idea of like what's going on. I actually miss getting to watch live all the time, so I'm actually looking forward to that. But this is one of the tournaments.
You as well. I miss you as well on the live crew.
Well, I this tournament specifically, I really am looking forward to. I think that the first 2 days you're going to see guys catching them all sorts of different ways, and I think that the interesting thing is, you've got 2 or 3 or 4 or how many ever different patterns and techniques that are possible to play here at Lake Murray. I think by the final day, it's going to be narrowed down. It's going to be like, I think this is kind of the deal that the guys really have a chance to win. But I think even by the final day of the top 10, you might have guys doing, 4 or 5 different things amongst the top 10, which to me is super exciting. It's not a deal where everybody's doing the same exact thing. It just makes it entertaining. And I can't wait for this event.
Yeah, there's going to be guys that are going to roll up to a point expecting the herring spawn to happen and it not go for them there, and they're going to have to scrap it, and then you will see them run up the river and throw a frog and catch just as much weight. Whether the river can win for 4 days or not remains to be seen, but I know there's quality fish all over Lake Murray, one of the most underrated lakes in the country, and it's definitely been popping off the last 12 months or so. And I'm looking forward to the Bassmaster Elite Series event there. For this episode of the Inside Bassmaster Podcast, I'm your host, as usual, Ronnie Moore, my guy, Kyle Jessie, signing off. We will see you during Bassmaster Live throughout the content process, and we will bring you the recap and the preview of Santee Cooper for the next stop of the Bassmaster Elite Series in the next episode. We'll see you there.